Hello, and welcome to a protocol introduction and discussion of the XMPP protocol. We have a few discussion topics that are covered in this video, starting with a brief discussion about XMPP, what does it mean, the structure of XMPP, going over JIDs, talking about stanzas, the three types of stanzas that are available, presence, IQ, and messages, a short discussion about rosters as well as components, and finally, a demonstration of some of these concepts in action. So what is XMPP? Well, it stands for Extensible Messaging and Presence Protocol. Breaking that down further, we have extensible, in that it's not limited to initial conditions. The protocol can be customized to individual needs. So for example, unlike its original intention to be human communication to another human, machines can talk to each other in what's called machine-to-machine language. Another further example is that a Jingle extension can be used in the XMPP protocol to allow for video and audio conversation. Next is messaging. Again, as described earlier, it was originally developed as a messaging platform, and the primary communication is the transmission of short messages between server and client and client and client. Presence, in that it's reactive to users' presence and status. The XMPP servers can use presence-driven logic to trigger events, notify other users or the server, or have other actions be customized based on those presence and statuses. And finally, protocol, meaning that it's not a proprietary language. It's based on the standardization from the XML Standards Federation. And the XMPP protocol is also an open platform, meaning that it's constantly evolving and improving by many developers across the globe. XMPP takes place inside a single data stream between a user and a server. This basic diagram shows some basic stanzas being sent between the user on the left and the server on the right. As you can see, it begins with opening up a stream, followed by some presence status being shown, a message, perhaps some IQ stanzas, followed by the user sending an unavailable stanza, and then finally the stream is terminated on both sides. We'll go over the details on what each of these stanzas mean later on in the presentation. The basic unit of user identification in an XMPP system is the Jabber ID, or JID for short. There are two varieties of the Jabber ID, the bare JID and the full JID. The bare JID contains just the local and domain part of the username. This may seem similar to an email. However, unlike an email, it also comes in a full JID, which has a resource. This means that for a single logon, you can have multiple resources logged on to the same user. So for example, if you wanted to log on to a tablet, a mobile phone, and your PC, they can all have separate resources and can be logged in at the same time. This also means that users who wish to address you or important messages can be routed to a specific device or a resource location. Communication in an XMPP server is broken down into stanzas. Stanzas are short contained XML messages that are sent through the server between clients and other clients, clients and servers, as well as server to server. They come in three different types: presence, IQ or info query, and messages. The basic structure for a stanza is shown here, with a header starting with the stanza type, with a from or a to indicator, and those may be optional, with a type indicator, and a unique ID to help the server, or perhaps a database, identify the particular stanza later on. There are child elements and subchild elements, similar to an XML file, that may be included in the stanza to either help extend or to bring more content into bear for that particular stanza. The first type of stanza that we'll encounter is presence stanzas. They're used to indicate a user status, and they can be used as a trigger for events inside the server. A presence is shared with all users on the roster. So for example, if you have somebody on your roster and they log in, you will receive a presence stanza from them, indicating that they're online. They may be sent by components, servers, or clients. And there are 5 different show tags used to indicate some status along with that presence: chat, away, extended away, do not disturb, and unavailable. But presence stanzas may not have a show tag. This would just indicate that they are online. There also may be child elements to elaborate some content inside that stanza. We have the show element that we discussed earlier, and a status that will be any text string to elaborate further. So for example, if you want to go away and say that you're on lunch, you can enter a away show tag along with the I'm at lunch status, and anyone viewing your profile at that time will be able to understand where you are. There's also a priority element that's an integer between -128 and +127, which we will cover in a moment. And lastly, C, which is custom content. You must provide an XML namespace along with this content so the server knows how to parse this information.
Priority elements determine the most available resource. You have positive and negative values. Negative values means the resource may be offline or unavailable. Positive values determine who is more available. So if you have a mobile or a PC, a mobile can be set to 5 and a PC to 10. Messages will arrive at the PC until it logs off, and then the mobile phone will receive it as long as that presence hasn't changed. The priority element can also affect message processing. There are some basic rules listed here. Finally, the default priority is 0 if it is not set by the client. Presence stanzas can be used in a number of ways. Here are a couple typical use cases. Firstly is the initial presence. This presence is sent to the server from the client once login is finished. Afterwards, the server then delivers that presence to any interested parties who may have you on their roster. Another type of use case for presence stanzas is the presence probe. A presence probe acts like an "Are you there?" statement to verify that connected resources are still online. This can be handy for different clients that may have logged off uncleanly and not sent an unavailable type presence. The connection may then be closed or acted upon if no response has been made. Note that presence probes are not used if this user and the server are on the same machine. Another type is presence broadcast. This type of presence stanza is sent when changing statuses like away. As shown here, a very short presence stanza is sent to the server. That server then delivers that stanza to all interested parties that may have you on their roster. Another type is directed presence. This is a presence stanza with a specific to section. It may have no type or an unavailable type, and this is used to change status to certain parties. This may be sent to specific people or specific groups. Finally, the unavailable presence. This is used to begin a server disconnection procedure and alerts interested parties that the user is offline. There may be a status element contained within the stanza to give some more information about why you are logging off. A brief example here is muck presences, which they work the same, but rather than the server acting as the distributor, the multi-user chat component acts as the distributor. As you can see here, we have a basic presence from the chat room to user B, letting know that user A is away. So how do we manage who gets what presence? Well, we do this by use of presence subscriptions. Subscriptions can only be subscribed to bare JIDs, and they require permission. However, some clients may allow pre-approval of subscription requests. Presence subscriptions are managed using presence and IQ stanzas. There are 4 different subscription types associated with presence subscriptions. Firstly is none, where you just want to have somebody on your roster, but you don't care about their presence. Vice versa, they may not care about yours. From is where your contract is interested in your presence only. For example, an administrator that wants to know when you are on and offline. To being the opposite. Like if you want to know when the administrator is on and offline, but he is not interested in knowing when you are on or offline. And finally, both, when both parties are interested in each other's presence. Here's a brief example of a presence subscription request. The initial request is sent using a presence stanza from admin@example.com. In this case, we're asking to get a subscription from user@tigase.org. The server then takes that presence stanza and generates a request IQ stanza and then sends it off to user@tigase.org. As you can see here, it initiates with a subscription type of none. The receiving user sends a presence stanza to its server saying that it wishes to subscribe.
Internally on the remote server, that roster push is then created using an IQ stanza, and now noticing that the description is from. The remote server now sends a directed presence stanza to admin@example.com, letting know that user.tigase.org is online. The local server, having received a presence stanza from user@tigase.org, creates a local roster push, now adding the subscription type of from for admin@example.com. And finally, an outbound directed presence from admin@example.com is sent to user@tigase.org, letting them know that they are online and ready for chat. The second type of stanza that we'll cover is IQ stanzas or info query, which I've already seen in the previous slides. They're the primary method of how information is obtained and sent, and can be used to request and change settings. They provide for a request and response mechanism. There are 4 different types of IQ stanzas: set, get, result, and error. The first type of info query stanza that you should be really familiar with is service discovery, or DISCO. It can be used to find details out about servers, users, features, and other things such as rooms and multi-user chat rooms, and other services available. There are 2 different XML namespaces available for the query type. This is disco hash items, which will request available items. For example, available muck rooms in a multi-user chat component, users that are logged into a server, and services and features available about a server. The second type is a disco hash info that requests information about a specific entity. For example, if you wanted to know some details about a particular user, or some details about a particular room, like what features are available for that room. The requests are made in this particular fashion, with an IQ statement with a from and a to-JIT. For example, we're sending it to example.com with a type of get, followed by the query XML namespace of disco hash items. The to-JIT may be a server, component, or users. However, the from-JIT is not always necessary in all IQ stanzas. Let's go over an example item and take a brief look. In this example, we are sending a IQ type of get query to xmpp.server.org. In this case, it will retrieve a couple things for us. After the sub-element of query with the XML namespace disco.info, disco hash info, we receive an identity explaining that it's a server, what type of server it is, and the name and the date as provided by Tigase. This is followed by sub-elements that are features. Each line specifies a different feature. In this case, this server has a Jabber client, a multi-user chat interface, offline storage for messages, vcard temp, as well as nicknames. So for example, using this information, we wanted to change our nickname. So we would send an IQ stanza of type set with a unique ID to the server. The first sub-element is vcard XML namespace to tell the server what we're doing there, specifying that we're a cool user. The server, having interpolated our request and completed it successfully, returns with a result IQ. Notice there's no other information in this IQ statement. We can assume from this that everything went through okay. If, however, something did not operate correctly, we would receive an error type IQ stanza. The last type of stanzas are message stanzas. They're designed to carry person-to-person text, and they can be extended to deliver rich text or different formatting. And there are 5 different message types. Chat, which is a one-on-one message between 2 users. A group chat, that's a message being sent to and from multi-user chats. Headline messages, which are alert messages that do not expect a reply. Normal messages, where standalone messages with no history, but a reply is expected. And finally, error messages, messages a nickname sub-element.
error delivery. Now messages, like other stanzas, may have specific child elements. The main one that you're going to encounter most often is the body. It's normally included, and this contains the human-readable XML data. It may have extended content, however the XML namespace must be specified. Shown here is an example from Romeo and Juliet. We've decided to use extra content using the XML namespace that allows us to use HTML tags to bring more flavor to the actual body element. Firstly is a body element that's included for clients that cannot parse the XML namespace. This is followed by the XML namespace being specified, and then the body content itself, but now using HTML tags to bring more flavor to that content. Message stanzas may have a subject element specifying the subject of the message. This is entirely optional, but it's meant to be read by people. Lastly, the thread element, which is non-human readable and uses a unique ID to collect messages under specific topics. They may possess a parent element that identifies it as an offshoot of another thread. Again, this is also optional use and is typically not run by clients but by servers to organize message stanzas. Here's another example of a brief conversation between two users. These are basic message stanzas, and they do not contain any extra content. This gives you a good idea of the flow between two parties as messages are exchanged back and forth between two users. And finally, a moment about components. Components are items of code that can extend or provide services to the server. They typically will come with a server installed. However, they may be separate components that are added onto the server installation after the server is up and running. They can be turned on or off either at the start of the server instance, or some may be turned on or off during real time, depending on your server installation. They'll typically have a JID assigned to them, so messages and other commands can be addressed specifically to the component in question. For example, we may have a pubsub component, and the JID will typically be something like pubsub@example.com. A few other example of components are multi-user chat, HTTP interface, advanced message processing, and Jingle. Again, your server may have different components available or component services that you can download and install on your installation.
Let's take a look at the XMPP protocol in action. Here we have the SCI client open up to the server xmpp.example.com. We have the XML console window open, and this console window will show us the raw data between us, the server, and other users that may be on the server. Let's begin by seeing a present stanza when Scott, one of our contacts on the roster, logs in. We receive a present stanza with no show tag and a priority of 5. This basically just lets us know that he is online and ready for chat. Briefly, let's send him a quick message. With a brief body, and notice there's an active XML namespace that specifies chat states, which lets him know when we're typing, when we're idle, and when we're sending a message. Let's say, for example, we're not really interested in having Scott's presence anymore. We send an IQ stanza to remove him from our roster. This is shown in this exchange here, where we set the subscription to remove from Scott, and we receive some information from the server, and finally a pair of confirmation messages both from and to the server, letting him know that we now have removed Scott from our roster. We've sent a message to scott@xmpp.example.com. Finally, when we log out, we send a presence type of unavailable to the server. In this case, we've added a status that says logged out. We are now disconnected from the server. We hope this example has brought to light some more detail inside the stanzas being sent to and from the server, and gives you a better idea of the overall XMPP picture.